Imagine waking up one morning in 1940 and discovering that your quiet village, your farmhouse, your very backyard, had been marked as a battlefield long before the enemy even arrived. Imagine learning that, beneath the peaceful soil, beneath the hedgerows and gardens, Britain had built a secret army, an invisible force sworn to strike behind German lines the moment the invasion began. This is the story of the war Britain hoped would never be fought, and the resistance prepared to fight it in the dark. The summer of 1940 carried a strange silence across Britain. France had fallen, the Low Countries had collapsed, and the white cliffs of Dover were now the final wall between Hitler and the last unconquered corner of Western Europe. The British people waited, watching the horizon, wondering when the storm would break. But beneath the fear, under layers of soil and secrecy, something else stirred. Churchill had foreseen what few others dared imagine, that Britain might soon be occupied, and he demanded preparations unlike anything the country had ever seen. Not just air raid shelters, not just coastal defenses, but a hidden resistance trained, armed, and ready to unleash chaos the instant German boots touched British sand. They were called the auxiliary units, but their true purpose was far darker, far more desperate than the name suggests. These men were not ordinary Home Guard volunteers. They were not the old, the unfit, or the retired. They were hand-picked gamekeepers, farmers, miners, woodsmen, men who knew every ridge and hollow of the countryside. They were chosen for their stealth, their grit, and their ability to endure the unthinkable. They trained not to defend, but to vanish. Not to hold the line, but to disappear underground, literally, and strike from the shadows. Across Britain, from Cornwall to Northumberland, construction teams slipped into remote woods, overgrown hedges, and lonely slopes. Under careful camouflage, they dug deep, excavating long earthen tunnels that would become the secret operational bases of the auxiliary units. These subterranean hideouts were reinforced with corrugated steel, timber props, hidden doors, and ingenious ventilation shafts disguised as tree stumps or rabbit holes. To the unknowing eye, these places were nothing but woodland. To the trained auxiliary officer, they were the birthplace of Britain's shadow war. Each base housed food for 2 weeks, explosives, ammunition, compasses, radios, and enough weaponry to cripple entire columns of advancing German armor. But the darkest truth lay in the expectation given to each volunteer. None of them were expected to survive longer than 2 weeks after an invasion. 2 weeks, that was the life expectancy of Britain's secret resistance. Their mission was not escape. It was disruption, sabotage railway lines, destroy fuel dumps, assassinate German officers, and, if Britain's government fell, eliminate collaborators, British citizens who aided the occupiers. It was a brutal doctrine. But in 1940, brutality was all that stood between survival and extinction. Training was conducted under the veil of night, in abandoned quarries, in deep forests, in barns sealed against prying eyes. The men learned silent killing techniques, booby traps, advanced explosives handling, and how to move like ghosts. They studied German tactics, German convoy patterns, and German weak points. They learned how to take out a sentry with one strike, how to wire a bridge to collapse under a panzer column, and how to live without being seen, heard, or even imagined. A typical patrol consisted of 6 men. Each knew the terrain intimately. Each knew he might never return home. They wrote no records. They kept no diaries. They told no family, to their wives, their sons, their neighbors. They were simply part of the Home Guard, nothing more. But beneath that harmless uniform, beneath the armband and the bolt-action rifle, they carried a secret far heavier than any weapon. They were Britain's last line of resistance, the ones who would rise only when all else had fallen. At night, as village lights dimmed under blackout curtains, auxiliary patrols slipped into their hidden tunnels. They memorized maps, studied demolition charges, practiced loading magazines in total darkness. The air inside the bunkers was damp and metallic. Oil cordite, damp soil, human breath that created a smell that no one ever forgot. Above them, Britain slept uneasily. Below, Britain prepared for its darkest hour. And though the German invasion never came, the secret army waited, silent and unseen, ready to ignite a war of shadows. Dawn in rural Britain carried a deceptive calm in 1940. Light drifted across quiet fields, cattle stirred, and church bells ring over distant hills. Villagers stepped into their routines as they always had. But just beyond the tree line, hidden beneath earth and timber, something was changing. Britain ancient, peaceful, pastoral Britain was quietly reshaping itself for a brutal, unseen war. The men chosen for the auxiliary units lived double lives. By day, they tended their farms, repaired fences, delivered milk, and cut timber. They spoke casually with neighbors, laughed in pubs, and stood in the home guard ranks without attracting the slightest suspicion. But by night, they disappeared into darkness, slipping into the woods with the precision of trained commandos. They were not soldiers in the traditional sense. Their war would not take place on open fields or fortified beaches. It would unfold in shadow between hedgerows, inside derelict barns, beneath railway bridges, and inside the concealed underground chambers that only they could find. Inside these operational bases, the air was thick, cool, and heavy. The walls, lined with corrugated metal, held the humidity of the soil. A single lantern glow flickered over crates of Sten guns, Thompson submachine guns, Mills bombs, and plastic explosives. Rolls of detonating cord lay coiled like sleeping serpents. Above all of it, maps, dozens of them hung from makeshift racks, each marked with red pencil. Fuel depots, rail lines, telegraph poles, crossroads, police stations, and the homes of potential collaborators. The men studied these locations relentlessly. Every corner of their patrol area had to be memorized, because if the invasion came, they would have no time to think, only act. Their instructors, many veterans of irregular warfare, taught them how to sow chaos with precision. The key to effective sabotage, they learned, was not massive destruction, but targeted paralysis. Destroy one locomotive and you force the enemy to divert engineers. Cut a telegraph line and you darken entire sectors of communication. Remove a single officer and you unravel command structure. Every lesson carried the cold logic of survival. Hit fast, disappear faster. In training exercises, the men practiced breaching mock fuel depots fashioned from barrels and timber frames. The explosion drills were nerve-wracking. One wrong connection, one spark, one mistake could level the entire chamber or cripple the patrol. But they learned, methodically, as all soldiers of desperation do. Silent killing was perhaps the darkest part of their instruction. Under the guidance of special duties trainers, they were taught how to move unseen, how to neutralize a guard, how to strike efficiently and without hesitation. Not because they sought violence, but because occupation leaves no room for mercy. If they hesitated, a German patrol might uncover their hideout, their weapons, their maps, and the entire network would unravel. Each man understood the stakes, each man accepted them. But the secrecy weighed heavily. They could tell no one, not even their families, the true purpose of their training. A wife might watch her husband slip out after dusk, believing he was joining a civil defense drill, unaware he was practicing techniques designed for a war fought behind enemy lines. A son might wonder why his father's boots were caked with mud long after the home guard meeting ended. A daughter might notice that he flinched when a car slowed near the farm gate. The burden of silence was immense, yet this secrecy was their strongest weapon. For an underground army, invisibility is survival. Even their mobilization plan was hidden in plain sight. When the invasion came, they would not report to the home guard, they would not line up for defense. Instead, they would vanish, sometimes in the middle of the night, sometimes during breakfast, leaving behind empty beds and half-finished meals. They would retreat into their underground bases and wait for the signal to begin their deadly work. Their role required a level of mental endurance few could understand. These men prepared for a mission knowing they were expected to die not in battle lines, but in silence, alone, far from family, hunted in their own homeland. And yet they trained with determination, driven by a simple and uncheckable belief: if Britain fell, they would not let it fall quietly. Above them, across the channel, German invasion barges gathered. Luftwaffe squadrons battled RAF fighters for control of the sky. Europe lay in chains. Britain stood alone, but beneath its fields, hedgerows, and wooded ridges, an invisible army waited, ready. Their time might come tomorrow, or never, but still, they prepared. Night settled heavily across the British countryside in 1941. The blackout cloaked villages in darkness, but the land was far from asleep. Beyond the dim glow leaking around shuttered windows, a deeper world operated, a hidden network built to survive the unimaginable. Britain had no illusions now. The war would be long, brutal, and uncertain, and while the auxiliaries trained to fight after invasion, another layer of the resistance was taking shape above and around them. This was the Special Duties Branch, the eyes and ears of a nation preparing for occupation. Unlike the saboteurs in the underground bunkers, members of the Special Duties Branch lived in plain sight. They had no uniforms, no insignia, and no official recognition. Their tools were typewriters, coded messages, wireless sets, and the subtle art of listening without ever being noticed. Shopkeepers, vicars, school teachers, railway workers, postmasters, ordinary men and women who blended seamlessly into their surroundings. Their task was simple in principle yet perilous in execution: observe everything, report everything, remain invisible. The branch operated through a sophisticated communication chain. At the top stood the control stations, secretly constructed rooms hidden in attics, barns, and church towers. Below them were the civilian informants, each sworn to silence, each trained to collect scraps of intelligence, troop movements, supply convoys, unknown vehicles, aircraft landings, suspicious visitors. The reports were written on special pads using invisible ink, disguised as mundane correspondence or scrap paper. Messages traveled through a carefully designed system of dead drops, hidden boxes, and secret couriers. A bread delivery boy might unknowingly pass a coded note tucked beneath a sack. A train conductor might carry a folded newspaper containing a message only one man knew to retrieve. A clergyman might store intelligence inside the hollow leg of his pulpit. And then, the most daring link of all, the wireless operators. These men worked in suffocating secrecy. Their sets were small but powerful, built to transmit bursts of information back to the control stations or, if the worst happened, to a government in exile. The operators hid their radios in chicken coops, beneath floorboards, inside tool sheds, and behind false walls. They had mere minutes to transmit before German direction-finding equipment could triangulate their position, a lesson learned from resistance networks across occupied Europe. Every message was a race against time. Every transmission risked death. In their small, shadowed rooms, operators tapped keys with steady fingers. The rhythmic pulse of Morse code echoed faintly, mixing with the creak of timber and the rustle of wind outside. If a car stopped near their home, their breath froze. If a dog barked unexpectedly, they killed the signal instantly, plunging into silence. Their survival depended on awareness, discipline, and luck. Yet, despite these dangers, the Special Duties Branch flourished. Britain's rolling hills and scattered farms provided perfect cover. Remote valleys shielded radio signals, isolated barns masked movement. The very landscape so old, so familiar became a weapon of resistance. While the auxiliary units prepared for physical sabotage, the Special Duties Branch prepared to disrupt the occupiers' grip on information. If the Germans invaded, the branch would become the nation's hidden nervous system, feeding intelligence to sabotage teams, circulating warnings of enemy patrols, and guiding targeted strikes. Without them, the auxiliaries would be blind. Without the auxiliaries, the branch would be toothless. Together, they formed a layered, interlocking defense plan unlike anything Britain had built before. But the human element of this shadow network was the most fragile. Operators lived under constant strain. They could confide in no one, not even their spouses. A simple misstep, a misplaced paper, a careless remark in a pub could destroy entire circuits of resistance. Loneliness hung over them like a permanent fog. Every day was a performance. Every smile was rehearsed. They lived to lives, both exhausting, both necessary. Still, they persevered. Even children unknowingly played roles. A boy flying a kite in a field might actually be signaling that a patrol had passed. A girl picking flowers near a wall might retrieve a message hidden in a stone recess. To the Germans, should they arrive, it would all appear accidental. To Britain, it would be lifeblood. What made this network extraordinary was not just its secrecy, but its scale. Hundreds of civilians participated, many never knowing the full extent of the organization they served. This compartmentalization, while isolating, protected the system. If one person was compromised, the entire network would not fall. It was resistance designed with mathematical precision and human courage. As 1941 drew deeper into war, the British countryside, so tranquil on the surface, had become a landscape wired for rebellion. Under the green canopy of trees and the soft glow of farmhouse windows, a quiet army listened, watched, and prepared. They were not soldiers, they were not heroes in the traditional sense. But when the invasion came, they would be the first to know and the last to fall. The invasion plan, Hitler's Operation Sea Lion, hovered over Britain like a shadow that never moved. People spoke of it quietly, as if too much discussion might summon it. But for the auxiliary units, the Special Duties Branch, and the planners working in sealed rooms in Whitehall, the invasion was not a rumor. It was a scenario rehearsed in cold, meticulous detail. In war rooms, lit by dim lamps and cigarette smoke, officers laid out maps of southern England. Red arrows marked expected landing points along beaches from Kent to Sussex. Engineers traced the boundaries of likely armored thrusts pushing inland toward London. Analysts estimated how long RAF Fighter Command could hold the skies before German superiority overwhelmed them. And beneath all these predictions lay one grim assumption: if the Wehrmacht reached British soil in force, the conventional army might not hold. That was where the secret resistance would begin its terrible work. The moment German boots touched the sand, auxiliary units would activate. Notification would not come through radios or telephone lines, those would fall first. Instead, prearranged signals, often as simple as a coded phrase on BBC broadcast or the arrival of a runner, would send men into hiding. Across Britain, patrol members would slip from their homes without explanation. A wife might watch her husband rise from bed, dress silently, and embrace her with a gravity she didn't understand. A father might set his son's cap straight before walking into the night. These farewells would be quiet, almost gentle, yet heavy with the weight of finality. Once inside their underground bases, the patrols would seal the hatches, camouflaging them so completely that even trained searchers would miss them. Their first task: wait, let the enemy advance, let them settle. And when the occupation began, when German trucks rumbled through villages and officers commandeered town halls, then the auxiliary units would strike. Their targets were predetermined: fuel depots, ammunition stores, rail choke points, power stations, bridges. Every detail had been rehearsed. One patrol might emerge under cover of darkness to place explosives on a railway line essential for German logistics. Another might ambush a convoy using hidden firing pits. A third might focus on eliminating key officers to cripple local command structures. The objective was not to defeat the invaders outright, but to fracture their control so thoroughly that Britain's spirit of resistance could never be extinguished. In the event of widespread occupation, some patrols had even darker missions. Documents revealed years later showed lists names of individuals considered likely to collaborate with the Germans. If Britain fell, these men and women would be executed swiftly to prevent the formation of puppet administrations. It was ruthless, it was cold, but it mirrored what had already occurred in Norway, France, and the Netherlands. Britain prepared for realities, not fantasies. The Special Duties Branch would play an equally critical role. As the Wehrmacht seized communication centers, disarmed police, and imposed curfews, the branch would function as an underground intelligence machine. Signals operators would transmit updates on troop movements, supply routes, and command posts. They would work under crushing pressure, knowing German direction. Finding teams had honed their skills by hunting resistance networks across Europe. In barns lit only by the glow of a single lamp, operators would tap coded messages. The staccato rhythm of Morse would cut through the stillness. Every tap a risk, every second a gamble. A misjudged transmission could bring a German patrol crashing through the doors within minutes. Yet without these messages, auxiliary strikes would be blind. Their partnership was a knife-edge balance of precision and danger. But what made Britain's resistance strategy most unique was its acceptance of sacrifice. Unlike the French Maquis or Polish Home Army, which operated inside occupied countries, Britain built a resistance knowing its fighters would not survive long enough to see liberation. Their bases held enough food for 2 weeks, ammunition for perhaps a dozen operations. After that, They were expected to die either in combat or by their own hand to avoid capture. This was not melodrama, it was strategic reality. Sabotage operations by small units behind enemy lines were never sustainable. Their power lay in the initial shock, the disruption, the confusion, and, in that chaos, the hope that Britain, whether from abroad or through surviving forces, might claw back control. Still, the human cost weighed heavily. Men wrote private letters they never sent. Some buried small items, family photos, medals, keepsakes in the soil near their bases, knowing that if an invasion came, those would be the only remnants left of their lives. And yet, despite all this, their spirit did not break, their purpose forged them. Their country united them, their duty defined them. For they believed something profound: if Britain must fall, then let it fall fighting. And if Germans marched through British towns, then the occupiers would never know a moment of peace. The invasion never came. No German division stormed the beaches of Kent. No panzer columns thundered across the downs. No village green echoed with the bark of German orders. Instead, Britain endured. The RAF held the skies. The Royal Navy guarded the Channel, and by 1941, Hitler turned his eyes east. Operation Sea Lion slipped quietly into the realm of abandoned dreams. But the secret war the war Britain built beneath its own soil did not fade away. It simply remained unseen, suspended in silence, waiting for a catastrophe that never arrived. And when history turned its pages toward a different battlefield, the men and women of Britain's underground resistance quietly returned to their lives, carrying memories they would never share. The auxiliary units and the special duties branch were never activated in combat. Yet their existence changed Britain in ways few understood at the time. For one, the secrecy itself endured. Patrol members were bound by the Official Secrets Act. They spoke nothing, not to wives, not to children, not even to fellow servicemen. Many took their knowledge to the grave. Some died believing their service might never be recognized. And for decades after the war, the world carried on oblivious to the shadow army that had prepared to die in silence beneath its feet. But the secrecy could not last forever. When documents finally emerged in the 1960s and 70s, a different picture of wartime Britain came into focus. The heroic narrative of the Home Guard, the courage of RAF pilots, the tenacity of the Royal Navy, these were familiar stories. But suddenly, another layer appeared beneath them: the hidden fighters, the watchers, the saboteurs who trained in darkness while the rest of the nation slept. Historians were stunned by the scale. Villages across England, Scotland, and Wales had concealed secret bunkers mere steps from footpaths and cattle fields. Ordinary shopkeepers had pass-coded intelligence through daily transactions. Teenagers had unknowingly carried messages that could have altered the course of an occupation. And the ingenuity of the network astonished even seasoned military analysts. The camouflage designs, the underground ventilation disguised as tree stumps, the quick-destroy radio sets, the compartmentalized intelligence chain, the pre-planned sabotage points. It was a resistance force years ahead of its time, an early template for modern special operations. But the true power of this secret army lay not in its weapons or hidden bases, but in the men and women who inhabited this world of uncertainty. Consider the farmer who dug his own grave without calling it that, who practiced firing from a concealed pit, knowing he would never retreat. Or the young wireless operator who memorized codes she would never use, her mind carrying a weight of silence she could not share. Or the school teacher who prepared lists of railway junctions, knowing that if the worst happened, he would guide a wave of destruction across his own homeland to save it. They were patriots forged in quiet resolve. Their battlefield existed not in France, or North Africa, or the Pacific, but in the imagination of an enemy who never landed. Yet that imagined battlefield shaped reality. Because Hitler did know about Britain's potential for resistance. Abwehr reports, scattered intelligence fragments, and observations from occupied Europe told the German High Command what resistance could do to an invading force. The British landscape, with its hedgerows, stone walls, narrow lanes, and dense woods, was tailor-made for guerrilla war. And if Britain could mobilize its irregular defenders the way it had prepared to, then occupation would become a nightmare. The unspoken terror of a hostile, rebellious population may not have stopped Hitler outright, but it was one more stone in the avalanche of obstacles that made Sea Lion impossible. And so, Without firing a shot, Britain's secret war won a silent victory. After the war, some of the underground bases collapsed. Others were boarded up, forgotten beneath moss and bramble. Children played on hillsides unaware that tunnels lay beneath their feet. Farmers plowed over hidden entrances. Entire patrols grew old. Never speaking of the nights, they vanished into the woods to rehearse a future that mercifully never arrived. But occasionally, a piece of the past surfaced: a rusted escape hatch, a buried ration tin, a rotting wooden beam where a patrol once gathered. And in those moments, the forgotten war breathed again. Today, the legacy of the auxiliary units and the special duties branch stands not in monuments or medals, but in the quiet strength of the British home front. Their story is a reminder that heroism is not always loud. Sometimes it lives in silence. Sometimes it hides beneath the earth. Sometimes it prepares for a war the world hopes will never come. And though no invasion landed, though none of these men ever fired their first shot, their readiness changed history. Their training shaped strategy. Their existence strengthened Britain's resolve. They were the soldiers of a war that never happened, the guardians of a country that refused to surrender, the invisible defenders of a free nation. And their watch, though silent, protected everything.